SVC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily Podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
FanDuel and DraftKings have divorced from the American Gaming Association, ending a 7-year marriage as the top two in online sports betting pursue a new lover, prediction markets. This latest development displays the fallout of last week's bombshell news that FanDuel and DraftKings were among many operators openly pursuing sports contracts as part of their prediction market ventures. So, what now for the American Gaming Association, and how fixable is this broken relationship? Welcome back to iGaming Daily, supported by Optimove, the creator of positionless marketing and the #1 player engagement platform. I'm Charlie Horner, and today I'm joined by our managing editor, Jessica Welman. Well, Jess, this news broke last week, and it appears to me that every time you take some time off, the world explodes.
I really do it to myself. I made it to 2:15 on Monday of my vacation before something happened where I had to go get the computer. And it was a week, man, with all of the prediction market exits. There was Calci won in this tribal case, which is a little bit different than all of these other cases, in that they won. The preliminary injunction was denied in that case, so they can keep on going in California. And then yesterday, this news came out right as I was getting in the car to drive home from New Jersey. So you're welcome, world. Next week I'm off for Thanksgiving. Buckle up.
Yeah, I don't even want to think.
I know. I think, like, God willing, at least in the U.S., nobody's that big a monster, but we'll see.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But anyway, look, this is the latest development in this whole prediction market saga, and what a saga it has been. But FanDuel and DraftKings leaving the American Gaming Association. I guess, what is your first reaction to this? Personally, I am shocked but not surprised. Would you concur with that?
I was surprised. I was not. Part of it was, like, I didn't really realize, like, they were doing the big annual meeting right now. That is not something I typically keep track of. I knew at G2E that the AGA was in a very precarious spot where members were pretty divided. And I think we've talked on the pod about why, which is that those with brick and mortar interests have a very different point of view about this than those without. So it makes a lot of sense to me, but, like, much more than the Nevada thing, which, like, that's honestly, it's kind of a nothing burger. Like, oh, we're going to give up licenses in a state that we basically had no plans to ever be in. This is the one where it's just like, oh, we're breaking up. This is for real. And so that was, I was surprised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tom and I spoke about, we briefly mentioned the whole Nevada thing on the podcast earlier in the week. And we essentially said the same thing, that the Nevada thing, not that big, but it does signal an intention from FanDuel and DraftKings that they are willing to put themselves on the line for prediction markets. This is just underlining that 2 or 3 times. This is them saying that, no, we are willing to break away from our trade body in order to pursue our business interests. So it might be beneficial for listeners who aren't in the US just to outline why the AGA is so against prediction markets, just to outline where the differences are here.
Yeah, so the prediction market stance by the AGA has always been, this is very obviously sports betting, this is very obviously gambling, and this is very obviously illegal. Bill Miller, the CEO of and president of the AGA, got on stage at G2E and gave a very clear-cut speech to that fact. They have done a lot of lobbying on this front as well. We've talked about on past pods. There's a big difference here in that, like, we're in the very early stages of all of these court cases, right? this is something, as we've talked about, unfortunately is going to go on for a couple of years. If the end result of these cases is some sort of decision that effectively says that the state doesn't get to decide casino rules or gambling rules in their own state, this isn't just sports betting that's at risk here. This is everything. This is online casino, this is lottery, this is brick and mortar casino. So the calculus for an MGM, for a Caesars, has always been just much, much different than the pure online companies like FanDuel and DraftKings. And so that is why, since the AGA is primarily made up of those companies, it has kind of leaned in this direction. I think it's probably worth noting, too, like, it's almost, you could kind of say that this experiment of seeing how the AGA does with kind of an untraditional member failed.
Yeah, let's jump into this, because the AGA and these operators weren't always friends, were they?
I mean, listen, in the time that I have been in this business, the AGA had a period of time where they were not even in favor of online gambling, period.
How fast things change.
You know, like, they used to be like, I don't know, this seems iffy, because that's what their members were saying. This is a company that traditionally is brick and mortar casinos. You see, their new chair is from Delaware North. If you look at what Delaware North as a company does, it bears very little resemblance to what FanDuel and DraftKings offer as an organization. So you look and you think about the DFS 1.0 days, and FanDuel and DraftKings were public enemies 1 and 2 to the AGA. They were Prize Picks and Underdog. They were Kalshi and Polymarket. And, like, miraculously somehow got through this situation, and because of their position in sports betting, became such behemoths that they ended up becoming AGA members. Like, it's a little crazy when you think about that. In the span of 10 years, you went from being persona non grata at a trade body to not only being members, but for like 3 years running, being like the featured keynotes on the stage of that trade body's major convention.
Essentially being the face of the association for a good few years, yeah. So this feels to me as though the AGA is going back to its base, supporting the brick and mortar, those land-based operators who have traditionally been the foundation of the association. So with that in mind, are FanDuel and DraftKings sort of jumping off the ship before they were pushed? Do you think that it would have ever come to that, where the American Gaming Association would say, hey, if you're going to be engaging in these products which our members don't agree with and think are threatening their business, you're no longer welcome in this organization?
Reading between the lines of Dustin Gauker's coverage of this, it sure sounds like they resigned before they got kicked out. I can't say for sure that's what was happening, but they saying they resigned before a vote could be taken on their membership tends to be like a sign that, like, listen, this was just a line in the sand. Like, you go and do this. We are really not okay with it. So yeah, I think they probably a mutual decision. I don't think that this is one, like, we agree to disagree, and we agree we're not going to get. What will be interesting to me is, now I'm curious if the AGA position on online casino maybe shifts a little bit. Because, yes, the Caesars and the MGMs and the Rush Streets of the world are very pro online casino, but there are plenty of members that, I think a couple of those members are in the National Association Against iGaming. They're probably gonna, they're certainly not gonna lobby for, like, untethered licenses and things like that. So you wonder if maybe their position on online casino changes that they are supportive of it, but they're only supportive of it in a way that benefits brick and mortar casinos. And they would not, like, okay, we'll work with FanDuel and DraftKings when we need to, and we're in agreement on something, and they have to partner with one of our partners. But like some of these bills where it's freestanding and you don't need, tethering, and sports betting too, like, I don't think they're going to be aligned on stuff besides prediction markets going forward.
Yeah, I agree, actually. I think that now the two biggest online operators have gone, they are probably going to be a little bit more traditional in terms of their public stances going forward. I mean, there's other online operators who we've mentioned. Obviously, I don't think they are members of the AGA. But
Prize Picks and Underdog are not, just so those who may be wondering. Like, they're not even, like, welcome at the Venetian at G2E. Like, this is a group that is off on their own, and the other people that are online operators are owners of brick and mortar casinos.
And so it seems to me that it's the American Gaming Association going back to what worked best for them before this explosion of online gambling, and that is what the American Gaming Association has been for most of its existence.
Yeah, I think, I'm sure their comms people, like, this week is going to be a major headache for them, but like, this was difficult. I mean, it was a thorny situation to have your membership really kind of violently split over prediction markets and how this is going to go forward and how you should pursue it. Because I think, like, FanDuel and DraftKings, I don't even know if they're rooting for Kalshi to lose in these other states anymore. You think about all of the turmoil they're having in New York, in Illinois, in these other places. You wonder if I will say they know that their sports betting product is better as a full sports book, but I don't know if they care as much if Kalshi wins or loses. Whereas before, you kind of assumed that they wanted them to lose.
Yeah, the margins are so much smaller in those states like New York and Illinois now, especially with states going back in and changing the tax rates. And
yeah, like in Illinois, FanDuel and DraftKings have hit the 20 million bets to get to 50 cents already. It started July 1st. They hit it in September. They hit it after 3 months.
And so Illinois' state lawmakers will see that as a victory. And then other states might look at that and say, oh, well, that worked. We might copy. And so you can see a world in which Kalshi wins.
Is it the worst thing?
The whole
for them?
situation is blown up. And then all of a sudden, FanDuel and DraftKings can offer their prediction market products and they can circumnavigate those hefty tax rates. It's an interesting hypothetical, but it might not be a hypothetical. Stick with us for the next couple of years, listeners, because
we're not shutting up about this anytime soon, that's for sure.
Well, it's a fascinating one, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this on the podcast again sometime soon, Jess, but we'll take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll still talk about FanDuel and DraftKings, but there's something interesting going on in Baltimore that we should probably talk about. So come back after the break.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Welcome back to iGaming Daily. Today we're talking all about FanDuel and DraftKings. In the top half, we were talking about them leaving the American Gaming Association. And now we're going to talk about something that's happening between FanDuel and DraftKings and the city of Baltimore. Jess, could you just introduce what's happening here, the background of this court case, and just give us a bit of an overview?
Sure, I believe we talked about it on the pod back in April when this suit first came down. So the city of Baltimore and its mayor, Brandon Scott, sued DraftKings and FanDuel for violating the city ordinance regarding consumer protection. This ordinance was kind of beefed up in late 2023 to allow law enforcement to go a little harder at companies that they felt were preying on people and at-risk populations. So the mayor was just like, you've gone overboard with advertisements and inducements, and your VIP program is shady, and you've got to cut it out. What happened was, as is off, anytime a case is filed in state court by a state, you're going to see the defendants try to take it up to federal court because, like, it's like home turf, right? So the operators tried to take it up to federal court, and what happened a couple of weeks ago was that the judge concluded, I'm not the one to answer this. This has to go back to the Baltimore City Circuit Court, and that's who has to answer it. So it's been kicked back down to the lower court, and that's where it's going to proceed going forward, which is a win for the city of Baltimore. Because, you know, like those consumer protection laws, I will be honest, these laws are like hundreds and hundreds of pages long, and I have not read them state by state because as much as you guys think I'm a sicko, I'm not that much of a sicko. But there's probably more room to work there than they would at the federal level have a case. So.
Mm-hmm. And so is that the reason why FanDuel and DraftKings try to take this to the federal court?
Exactly.
From the outside looking in, it seems like might be a little bit of that, but also a delay tactic. Try and put this into the long grass.
No, it's more venue is very important in court cases. And so you want the federal level where you can make different arguments and federal laws apply. You saw something similar happen in Massachusetts where when Massachusetts sued Kalshi, Kalshi tried to kick that up to the higher court and it got sent back down. Because same thing, it's not asking whether or not, these big federal questions. The judge was like, no, it's asking a very precise question about state law. This is where we have to do like quick civics lesson. The reason there are kind of two separate courts here in the United States is because there are laws particular to the state that you live in, and then there are laws that govern the entire country. And if it is a matter of a law that governs the entire country, you get kind of kicked up to the federal level. If it's something that's really specific to the state, that's when you handle it in state court. And so in these instances, they tried to kind of argue these have broader federal implications. And in both instances, the judge was like, no, this is something the state needs to figure out. I'm going to guess you're asking, your next question is going to be, why is it something that the state needs to figure out?
Perfectly leads me on. Yeah, but why?
So essentially what the judge said was, if I take this case and I do this, at the end of the day, we still have the problem that these sports books are regulated by a group of state laws and regulations that they are meeting the letter of that appear to be in conflict with these city laws. And we really have no kind of recourse or clarification on whether they overlap or interact or not, because I'm not really allowed to talk about whether that's the case. So it's like, if I address it, this main issue at hand, which is, do these two laws conflict with one another, doesn't get resolved. So for that reason, I got to send this back, and somebody who does have the jurisdiction to decide how these two laws kind of interplay with one another is the one who's going to make that decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Seems to me, though, that if we're talking about advertising and VIP programs, these are two aspects of an operator's business that are really important. And so I guess this is a really important case if it goes against the operators, right?
It is and it isn't. So, like, keep in mind, if they lose this, they're losing it because they are in violation of the city of Baltimore's ordinance. Mm-hmm. Which means, like, you can't really extrapolate that other places unless the ordinances have very similar languages. However, would it potentially inspire other cities to consider taking steps like this? A place like Massachusetts, which we know loves crap like this, like, would it inspire them to do something like this? Potentially. At the federal level, there are many, many cases similar to this questioning VIP practices and advertising, in particular, like these sign-up bonuses with playthrough requirements and whether they're, misleading or not. I think it would probably be more problematic to have a loss there, because then you've established federal precedent that could go across to other cases. But here at the state level, that is kind of one of the bonuses of being at the state level is, like, it may make them have to change things in the state of Maryland, but it wouldn't necessarily impact other places with a ruling. Yeah. It would look rough though, right? Like, the PR would not be ideal, but the legal ramifications wouldn't be as crazy as you would think.
No, but all due respect to the state of Maryland, but there could be worse states for that to happen in.
Maryland's a decently large state. You're talking about the DC metro area. You're talking about Baltimore. It's also, like, again, proximity to politicians hearing about this.
Well,
not
there is that. Yeah,
like it's
not great.
You'd rather maybe like a Wyoming, but so I think though. You think about, like, the mainstream media and how much the mainstream media picks up, especially on these consumer protection cases, and how many, like, segments I've seen about, like, the Jacksonville Jaguars guy being depicted as this sympathetic dude and people being preyed upon. And I do think the media fallout, if this goes in favor of Baltimore, would be pretty rough.
Mm-hmm. And so, just as we wrap this up then, what happens next? Is this going to be heard anytime soon, or are we going to have to wait a few months again? Or
court cases take a minute, right? So the state case was kind of on hold, basically, while they waited to see what happened. And that case was filed in April. We're now at November. So what happens now that it's been remanded back to the state court is the operators will have their opportunity to make their arguments about why, inevitably, I'm assuming, file their motion to dismiss, in which case then the city gets to respond to that, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have the ruling on the motion to dismiss by the judge, and that'll really be a determining factor of whether the case goes forward or not. If it does go forward, we're talking a long, long time because you've got discovery and all that stuff. But I would say, we'll say spring of next year, we'll probably be talking about this again.
Brilliant. Well, I'll put a quick note in my diary, and we'll revisit that then. But in the meantime, Jess, I'm sure we'll be talking about FanDuel and DraftKings again for something else next week, because it's such a busy period. But thanks for taking the time to talk through these stories with me today, and thank you to our listeners for tuning into today's episode of iGaming Daily. We'll put links to the SBC America's coverage of both of these stories into the show notes so you can take a read. And join us tomorrow for another episode and keep up to date with all the latest global gambling news.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.